So this particular panel is understanding managing money and investments in the arts. And in the arts, we know that financial precarity impacts our livelihood in families. We often work later, harder, and consistently without benefits. How do artists, arts organizations learn and understand managing money, or the ways to invest money as creatives, as artists, as arts organizations? These are the main pillars of this particular panel, and it's my pleasure to bring into conversation and to bring in the moderator for this particular panel, Melrose Cornwall, who's also is the board chair for SUPAMO. Welcome, Melrose.
Joining me are Vanessa Padillo and Heather Young, two very strong professionals in the finance market who have an amazing connection to the arts as well too. And we thought that that would be important to not only just connect you with people who not only understand the space that we're in, but they also understand the space that we're all trying to learn more and develop. I just want to provide a brief introduction to them because my bio is on the SUPAMO website. So you don't really need to hear from me, but it would be really cool to hear about the background of who we're going to be having speaking with us today. And so let's start with Vanessa Padillo. She's the executive director and co-founding member of a wealth management firm based in Calgary. She's also the founder and owner of Common Ground Dance and co-owner and director of Movement with the Message Incorporated. Vanessa also sits on the board of the Screaming Goats Collective. She earned a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Calgary Haskayne School of Business, majoring in risk management and insurance. Vanessa also holds a Chartered Professional Accountants, or CPA, and a Certified Management Accountants, CMA designation. Now, with this unique background, she's passionate about consulting businesses and individuals involved in the arts. So I'd like to welcome Vanessa. And not opposed, but on the other side of me, on my screen at least, I have Heather Clara Young, certified professional bookkeeper. She's a principal bookkeeper at Young & Associates, has worked in the field of arts management for over 30 years. Her experience includes leadership roles with arts and heritage service organizations, theater and dance producing companies, facilities, festivals, and community organizations. Young Associates, founded in 1993, provides strategic planning, financial, and data management services to specifically not-for-profits and charities, specializing in the arts and culture sector. Heather teaches accounting and financial management at Humber College's Arts Management Program and has taught for Humber's Fundraising and Volunteer Management Program and University of Toronto's Arts Management Program. She was a 2012 recipient of the Sandra Tulloch Award for Innovation in Arts Culture and a 2004 recipient of Humber College's Continuing Education Award for Excellence for Outstanding Academic Contribution. Finance for the Arts in Canada 2005-2023 is a unique self-study guide, reference source, and textbook for the accounting and finance functions in cultural organizations. And I ask you all to just welcome both Vanessa and Heather Young. And ladies, let's get this party started. Before we actually go into any details, actually, I was hoping that for all of you who are attending the call, just take a moment and consider this question. If you would like to, take a moment and consider it, or even put your answer into the chat, I'd like you to ask yourselves, what's your definition of financial security? Or what does financial freedom mean to you? Oh, we've got something coming in. So I see a balance. Thank you very much. I love this next one, not worrying all the time. Yes, I can identify with that. So the question that we had asked is, just for a moment, you can sit with the question for a moment, but consider, what's your definition of financial security? What does financial freedom mean to you? So we have one where it's a freedom from worry. We have one where there's a balance, and we have another one where it's a dedicated resources towards a clear mandate. So you can absolutely continue to populate those answers in the chat. I want to pause for a moment because in 2021, we also did an offering of financial literacy to everyone. And I just want to recall everyone or refresh everyone's memories. You may have had an opportunity to participate or you may not have, but I just want to pull up a PowerPoint presentation to show you some of the things that we had discussed. And then we'll start to lead into a conversation on the heels of that. So in 2021, we had a panel and we really wanted to focus on specifically educating and teaching folks about investing, right? And so we started that whole discussion essentially on what is investing, right? What are the things that you could invest in, or what are the most common, what we call in the industry, investment vehicles, which is really just the products and services that you can buy to put your money in. We talked about things such as individual stocks, which is ownership or piece of a company or ownership in a company. We talked about things like mutual funds, which is, if you understand stocks, sometimes stocks are really expensive. Not everybody has $1,200 to own a piece of Apple stock or a piece of a piece of Google stock. So what was created a long time ago is something called a mutual fund, where people would gather and at the end of the day, they would have a common goal or a mutual interest in either the investment portion or what you're investing in. And so it's basically a collection of people who have pooled their money together, and they can each buy a piece of that Google stock together. So maybe there's 100 people who put in $10, and they all buy a piece of that Google stock, and they're part owners of that share. Then we had a conversation about electronically traded funds, which is essentially a mutual fund, but just doesn't require all of the administration, like the people behind it to manage what they're purchasing and how those purchases are made, etc. We talked a little bit more about some of the other financial instruments as well too. But another thing that we talked about is we talked about some of the risks and some of the risks associated with investing that people may not have actually considered. And I'm going to pause here because I actually want to start with, some of the risks that can come about when you either personally or as a collective think about investing. So I'm going to stop the share just for a moment here. And I'm actually going to open it up to Vanessa or Heather. Let's talk about risks for a moment. And let's talk about some of the things that we should think about when it comes to risks. So what would you guys say? Maybe we'll kick it off with Heather. What would you say are some of the things that we should think about when we consider risks when it comes to investing?
Okay, so at a super, super basic level, just thinking about what is a risk, it's really a possible exposure to danger. So when you think about risk in general, like every time you set foot in a crosswalk to cross the street, you're undertaking a risk that somebody's going to knock you over, right? So we all are accustomed to taking risks in our day-to-day life. And the arts are about as risky as they can get in terms of entrepreneurship. So I think one of the things to say is that everybody in this call is probably accustomed to taking risks. You may not even think about it, right? Because it's so much part of your DNA, right? Taking artistic risk, unless you're doing the same thing over and over again, you're taking risks. So when you sort of apply that thinking to money, like you're applying it to something that may seem bigger and scarier, but conceptually it's kind of the same, right? And one of the ways of dealing with risks is to avoid it and say, okay, I shall never do art again. It was too risky. It made me scared. Or I'll never do money again. It made me scared. You can avoid it or you can embrace it, right? Two different ways of doing it. I'm going to defer to Vanessa because she knows a lot more about the investment side of risks than I do. That was a very generic response.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Heather, and thank you all for being here today. I'm so excited to talk about this topic when it comes to investments, when it comes to money, and then marrying that with art. Then you get the nerdy version of me. So really excited to be here to share. When it comes to risk at a very high level, let's define that a little bit. And Heather really spoke to this, like where the emotions can sometimes get involved. There is that, and I see it in the comment box that there are emotions of guilt, maybe a certain mindset with that. And if we kind of layer that apart, take that on, and really look into the root of that, what does that actually mean? And that risk is the unknown. It's the unpredictable. It's knowing that there is no a level of, say, perceived security. So how do we kind of get over that hump? And there are some methods like Heather spoke to. On a mindset level, it's then taking that unknown and educating yourself as well. How do I understand this in my own world, in my own vocabulary, so that I can get more comfortable with risk? Risk is an element where it's outside of our control sometimes. It's the marketplace, it's the economy, it's inflation. Like that is a risky element that we live in. But how do we mitigate those risks, or how do we de-risk those situations or factors that's outside of control, is to position ourselves where when we educate ourselves, and that level of education, whether it's working with advisors or working with other individuals that are more experts in this area, but understanding enough so that you can get comfortable with those risks and then make an informed, calculated decision. Whether it's in the marketplace, whether it's investments, whether it's in your arts, whether it's the next show that you're planning to do or fund. Yeah.
So what I'm really hearing is, making sure that you understand kind of your own personal, like what's your threshold? Like what is too much risk for you? And kind of like figuring out where that line is and working within that line.
Right.
Okay, so then I've got another question, and it's partially going to be informed by something that I saw in the chat here as well too. And there was this great kind of phrase that I think I'm going to attribute it to Leslie Ting, because she put that in the chat, where scarcity mindset, right? And when we talk about risks, I just want to throw this out because I don't want to derail this, but I was in a presentation with a journalist yesterday, and she was talking about it was talking about information freedom in Philippines, right? Like the journalistic integrity in the Philippines with the kind of environment that they're under right now. And what she was saying is we have to understand how to get comfortable with people who can't even consider the next step, because their first priority is food on the table today. Like today, I need to worry about how to eat, and that needs to be taken care of before I can worry about the next step. And so I want to bring that kind of idea into this conversation. For artists who work under precarious kind of situations, who have to go job to job, how do they deal with worrying about investing or retirement in the future, when they have to deal with the risk of, well, when is my rent or my lights going to get shut off? Or when are those things due? When is that art space due, like the payment for that space due tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. Boy, it's tough. I want to riff off the scarcity mindset. I just want to share something that I got actually from the former CFO of the Aga Khan Museum. And he spoke to my Humber students and basically said, scarcity mindset is just part of the game. It is. Like at the biggest museums, the biggest arts organizations, there's still a scarcity mindset because the money is finite. So he was sort of the opinion of suck it up a little bit, but it's more like learn to integrate that, right? Yeah. Like integrate that. It doesn't have to be threatening. Yeah, money is scarce. It just means that you have to make decisions.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Vanessa, what do you think?
Yeah, to add to that as well, a mindset, whether it's scarcity or whether you think it's abundantly, it really starts with looking at your situation, looking at the reality. Okay, what is my role today? And as a CPA in the world of finance, we always talk about constraints. Talk about whether that's a budget or whether that's operations, whether that's people, whether that's time, whether that's resources, and whether that's money. Is looking at where is my constraints? What is the highest priority that needs to be done today? Is it's food on the table? Yes. And if I can kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we're familiar with that, you got to get your foundation and your base needs covered, because we all need to live and we all need to eat, we need a place to live. So understanding that, but then not staying within that mindset of constraints and scarcity, saying, well, this is my situation today, but how do I build a plan? How do I build a roadmap so that I can start investing, so that I can start working on that project? What resources are around me, whether that's funding, whether that's people, what other areas that I can really position myself to get there? And that is a roadmap. And sometimes that can be a really hard conversation for ourselves to have. But that's the hard work that you as an organization or you as an individual artist, I think, is really an important and critical exercise too. to
Got
go
it.
through.
Yeah, Heather, please.
Yeah, if I could jump in on that. Yeah, you know what? I agree with everything you said. And I want to add that the threshold for entering may be lower than you think. Like you could open an investment account for as little as $25, right? So all you need is 25 spare dollars and you've got your beachhead, right? Like you've started a little something. And getting started is often the hardest part, right? Just making the first move, getting out there and doing something, choosing an advisor. Oh my goodness. Like there's so many barriers. If you haven't done it, there's so many barriers that feel like barriers, and you just have to find the way through, make a little weenie start. It could be as simple as going to your banker and asking what kind of investment vehicles they have available to you, and just do a little something. And if you can add to it in a very small way on a regular basis, it will actually amount to something over time.
Yeah. To just continue that part of it, I understand as an artist and also as a finance leader that sometimes the word money, sometimes the word investment can almost be a black box. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, I know it's there, I know it's important, but I'm just going to stay here. And sometimes that's the scary part, is like taking that first step and saying, okay, well, what is this black box? And do I have to be nervous about it? Do I have to be scared? Can I take that first step and really getting my finances in order, whether it's for my business or individual, and what resources are available to me, like a financial advisor? I would say that yes, investing and saving as much as you can today in your reality, in your world, is critical as well, because we have something called the time value of money and compounding interest. So time is on your side. So the earlier you can do it, like you probably heard it before, just let it work. $25, whatever you can afford. The other element to that is actually building a habit. So there's something called Atomic Habits. It's a really great book. I highly recommend it. For everyone, is small habits lead to big impact. So if you're investing that $25 and then next month, if you can allocate $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, whatever that is, and build that habit over time, then what really tends to happen is that whatever your financial situation is today, whether it's personal or whether you're looking at your business finances and your operations and saying, how much can I allocate toward investments? The habit that you have today, whether it's serving you or not, will then be reflected when you're in a totally financial different situation 10, 15, 20 years from now, because you've built those habits today.
Yeah. And you know what, just because I got both of you here, we've had conversations offline before as well too, and I just want to bring in a couple of things that both of you have mentioned that also tie into some of the things that I heard in the chat, and a couple of things that Kevin had mentioned earlier today too. And one of those is I remember a saying, I can't remember who says this, so I won't attribute it to anybody. You can attribute it to me if you want. But the best time to start is yesterday, and the second best time to start is today. And so someone had mentioned in the chat, you know, the feeling of shame and guilt that comes attached to, you know, maybe not being able to manage, or maybe not being able to understand the finance portion. And one of the things that I've seen that's powerful for a lot of people, Vanessa, you had mentioned that, you know, just and I wrote this down myself, take the shame and the guilt out of it, and just realize that, you know, you may need the money for a little bit of time, and then you may use it, you know, within 2 or 3 months and pull it all out. But then at the end of the day, number one, you've had that money that you've grown and you've accumulated, and you can use that, and then you can always start again. Right. And so when you had mentioned that to me, I absolutely love that. And I wrote that one down. And so I offer that to everyone on the call as well too. We can go into some of those a little bit more towards the end of the call, because I really do want to start to attack this mindset that we've all developed, even the professionals on the call. I've been in finance for almost 12 years now. Let me tell you, there have been times where I worry about money almost every day, right? And for Heather, I wanted to loop in something that Kevin had talked about, because he mentioned collaboration, and he mentioned intention and presence, and particularly in the art space. And you had mentioned something about I don't know if it was a collaboration group, or there was something about maybe seeing if you can find resources or collaborating with people with resources.
Right. So the one thing that I wanted to mention is a group called Business for the Arts. So they actually started a bazillion years ago, and it was major corporations that gave money to major arts organizations. So they've changed considerably over the years in terms of broadening it out and making it a lot more democratic. It's still a group of business people that want to support the arts. Their flagship program at the moment is something called Arts Vest, and I will throw that into chat when I'm done talking, just so that everybody has it. But they are running a mentorship program. It's Canada-wide. It's not tied geographically to any area, although in some regions, some businesses put in some extra money. But you can deal with this online, and you can get mentoring. It used to be very, very, very focused on fundraising and sponsorship, and they broadened that out again to governance and management issues. So it's a free mentorship service, basically, and their current focus is equity-seeking groups. So I would guess that anybody that's on this call today would be very welcome to sign up. They're doing monthly intakes. So I hope everybody will check that out. There's other places out there, like one of the things that I believe will be circulated at the end is a few links. So you'll see a few other suggestions for freebies, right? Places that you can go for some free help to just get started on this. You know, one thing I wanted to sneak in is I think people sometimes feel like if you go to an expert, you're going to walk through the door and they're going to be, oh, so you've come for advice. And it's really not true, right? You're the customer. Just think, like, if you saw me, schlubby me, entering your dance class, you'd be doing everything you could to encourage me to not give up, right? You would be doing your best. And I think you would find the same with other experts as well. Like if you go to somebody for tax help or investment help or accounting help, you're the boss, you're the customer, and they're going to try and make it be good for you. So don't walk in the door with that shame beast sitting on your shoulder. Like, really don't.
Yeah. And I love that. And you know, I also want to just throw in there as well too that, you know, not every single advisor is for you. And, you know, just make sure, you know, there are so many advisors out there, folks, that match what you need. They're in tune with what your needs are. And it might take, you know, an opportunity or to reach out to different advisors to see which one fits with you, just like you would choose the right venue for your performance, or the right teacher for learning a new skill set that you've got. Choosing the right advisor will exponentially change the way that you look at investing or look at managing resources and money, period. Oh, thank you for adding that in there. Vanessa, did you want to add anything?
I would just say money is one of those areas where it does feel taboo. It's not one of those dinner conversations. It's not where you hang out at a pub or at a patio and let's talk about money. You know, it's not. And I think, and someone, Leslie did say, Canadians don't talk about money at all. And so it has to be, in a way, for us to feel more comfortable with it, to get to a stage where we are opening that black box and understanding it a bit more, is to have those open conversations and finding that right advisor that you're comfortable with, because you are going to be sharing personal information. You're going to be sharing very sensitive information. And sometimes there's emotion that can come with that, because you have to look at your reality in numbers and say, this is where I'm at. But then also the other critical part when you're looking for an advisor is that they speak your language. They speak your vocabulary. Yeah. They don't just talk in jargons or big words or complicated words, which it can be, but you as the client, you as the customer, it has to sit well with you, because you're the ones actually giving them your money. If they're your investment advisor, or whether you're your tax accountant, when they're filing your taxes, or how you save on taxes, or what your refund would be. So to add to that, yes, I highly encourage to take some time to find the right advisor that works for you, because it is one of those situations where it's a long-term relationship. You want this advisor to be on your team. You want them to quarterback you. You want them to know that they're going out for you and looking at the best interest in your personal situation, because as we all know, every person and every business situation and circumstance are very unique and very different. So having that advisor that understands that and acknowledges that is so critical in the progression of success in your financial life.
Yeah. And you know what, thank you for saying that, because you mentioned something that I really wanted to add in here. And I think this one is a little bit different than what we've talked about. Can both of you actually just speak on, when you talk about long-term relationship, right? I think that we also need to understand that our relationship with finance is a long-term relationship. Our relationship with investing is a long-term relationship. And I think that just the way that we're all in kind of this gig economy, we all need things done now, and we need to reap the rewards now to move on to the next thing. I think it does us a disservice because we don't actually take a moment to understand that, look, $5, over the next, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever it is, isn't much. But, once you start to compound that with some of the gains that you get over time, it could start to really add up, right? And then if you're able to do more than $5, let's say you're able to do now $100 or whatever that is, right? Over time, now you've got $1,000. But the point is, it's over time, right? And so you can't just expect, in my opinion, that you're going to get this, this $1,000 by, August 31st, right? It's going to take some time. So what do you guys think? Like, what would you say is the most important part of investing when it comes to time? We're thinking about that time relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I would be saying it's a combination of factors, right? It's how much can you put in, and it's how much interest that you get.
Yeah.
Right? So interest rates, during the pandemic, interest rates were like so close to zero, they were practically zero, right? Like it was insane. And now suddenly everybody's talking about inflation. So inflation in our personal lives, rent, groceries, etc., it's terrifying. But inflation from a viewpoint of investment means that interest rates are a bit higher, right? So you get a more meaningful return. I think one of the important things to understand is that there's a relationship between risk and reward, right? So if you have your money in a current account, like a checking account, as they used to be called at the bank, it's going to be earning nil, zero interest. If you put it in a savings account at the bank, it's going to be super extra safe. You're going to be able to get it whenever you want, and it's going to earn this like tiny, tiny, tiny interest. Once you move into more sophisticated investment vehicles, you're going to see a better and better rate of return. If you want to invest in mining shares, you might get an astronomical return, but the chances of losing your money are much higher, right? So I'm going to defer to Vanessa, who undoubtedly knows a lot more than I do about the types of investment vehicles and at what thresholds you might be able to buy into them, right? And it's then going to be sort of a combination of amounts and how much you can lock it away for and what they're going to pay you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to really get started, there's lots of options out there where there are no minimums, which means you can take your $25, start right away, and start investing and let it grow. And depending on what type of investor you are, i.e., if you want to be hands off and you just want to say, I want to give this institution, this advisor my money, let them go because I don't understand it, I don't want to know, I just want to know that it's growing, it's getting put to work. There's options. There's also options if you want to educate yourself more, if you have the interest or the desire to learn about the different options of investment vehicles, then you can do that yourself and you can self-direct that as well. So there's lots and lots of like different options out there. This graph that I hope everyone can see, there are different types of accounts. So to put it all in very simple terms, you have different accounts such as non-registered and what we call registered accounts. The main differences are the purposes of the accounts, and also there are tax implications. I'm not going to go into the level of like tax detail, but at the very high level, the types of registered accounts that you see on the screen are tax in a way, like tax sheltered, where you're not avoiding that tax, but you're deferring that tax later when you withdraw. So the goal is in a registered account, is to put your contributions into where it's pre-tax, which is more advantageous to you. And then when you do take it out, you're taxed later in life. And hopefully at that stage, you're in a lower tax bracket. Okay. The other type of account that you can have is called a non-registered, which means that it is after tax dollars that you can put into it. But The difference, but a lot of people will do non-registered accounts because their registered accounts are maybe tapped already, which means that they've already contributed the limit of what they can contribute. And also non-registered account, whether it's for yourself individually or within your company, are done for tax reasons. Many of them are.
Thank you for adding that.
So I think one thing to say is you're going to get taxed on that money, no matter what. Like the government's going to make sure of that, but being taxed later is better than being taxed now. So you want to max out those registered accounts if you can, and then you won't be taxed, right? Like if you are an employee, your employer, if they have this facility, can do RRSP deductions off your paycheck and send them directly to an investment account, or perhaps even maybe give an RRSP contribution as a bonus or something, in which case there's no tax on it right at the moment. You're going to get taxed on it when you take that money out.
Yeah. And so just in that moment, because we've been talking a lot about, personal contributions and what you can do as an individual, but we do from time to time have a fair number of arts administrators or folks that represent organizations when it comes to the arts. And I'd like to ask the question, and I think I'll start with you, Heather. What would you say for a business or not for profit? Like, what should they be thinking about when they may be investing? Should they be thinking about, maybe things like such as grants, or should they be thinking about, maybe incorporating or not incorporating? What are some of the things that they could consider?
Tons of questions there. So let's say that you're in a position where you're able to apply for government funding, right? So one of the big questions there would be, is your government project grant your only source of money? Good question, because if your government project grant is your only source of money, you're pretty much on the hook to spend that money on the project. End of story. If you've got other sources of revenue, though, you aren't answerable to the government for what you do with your ticket sales and donations and other things. So try not to spend them all. Try to have a bit of a surplus in the company. Try not to let it be that money comes in, money goes flooding out, and you're starting at zero again. The more that you can have a little bit of gas in the tank on an ongoing basis, the better off you are. Another concept to lob in with respect to investing and nonprofits is cash flow, right? So let's say you get the project grant, hooray. You're probably not going to spend it all tomorrow. So if you can sort of map out when that money actually has to leave your account, you'll know what the time horizon is for possibly socking some of that money away. And then you can trot off to your banker. If you can hang on to some of that money and not spend it for, say, 3 months, you can totally put it in a term deposit for 3 months and make a little bit of interest. And then you get the grant plus whatever that little sliver of interest is. But hey, it's worth having, right? It's better to have it than not have it, even if it's not very much money, because it just helps ramp you up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To add on to that and to invest, if we can have a supply of, say, 3 months or whatever that magic number is to your organization, sometimes to know what that time horizon is can also be challenging in itself. Because the other component to that equation or that formula is, okay, money coming in, but then as we're doing that, we know we're spending money as well. Money is going out in your operating cost on a monthly basis with your overhead. So I encourage organizations, and as an art administrator, is to do an exercise called calculating your burn rate. So what is a burn rate? Your burn rate is your monthly fixed cost that regardless of what happens or not, you still have to pay that bill. Whether that's a building, whether that's people, whether that's other costs that you've committed to, there's contracts, there's agreements in place. What is that number total in a month? And then how long will that last you until that source of funding comes in, whether that's from the government or whether that's a donation or whether that's somewhere else. And then you'll be in a better position to know how much I need on hand before the next funding comes in. Because having that sense of clarity, having Brené Brown said, clarity is kind. So clarity and understanding where your finances in your organization, I think, helps to de-risk, going back to our earlier conversation, of a scarcity mindset in your organization. Mm-hmm. because sometimes it is scary. Sometimes you don't know where that is, but going through an exercise, and I'm going to be real about it, it may take a couple hours to find all those numbers if you're doing it yourself, if you don't have a bookkeeper or accountant. But going through that is going to be really helpful for you to understand where you are and then how to properly plan so that you can position yourself for financial success in your organization.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things to know about planning in advance, one of the things to tell yourself, again, to try and avoid those feelings of guilt and shame. The only thing that you can be absolutely sure of at the beginning of a planning exercise is that probably some of it will be at least a little bit wrong because you don't know exactly what's going to happen, right? If we all had a crystal ball, we would all be brilliant geniuses with finance, right? We would know exactly what was going to happen and we would be able to plan around it. So the trick is to just, as Vanessa said, like get started, you know, sit down for a couple of hours with a pad and a pen and try and think it through in terms of what your expenses are, what that burn rate is, and therefore what you might be able to sock away. And the thing that I didn't say about investments that is really important is, are they accessible or not? That's another factor, right? So if you are saying, okay, I'm pretty sure I can lock this away for 3 months, and then you find that something unexpected happens and you're not able to lock it away, look for whether or not the investment is cashable. If you've got a cashable GIC or a cashable term deposit, then if you make a mistake or if something unexpected happens, then you're covered. You probably lose the interest, but you still have access to your principal.
Yeah. And I think, you know, as you guys are mentioning these things, right, you know, like contributions, you know, putting money into these different accounts, that's, you know, what we would call a contribution, a time horizon, how long you need your money for, or, you know, what's the length of time that you need to consider this money either in the market or in your bank account. I think one of the things that's probably going to be the most important that we just can't ignore is, unfortunately, folks, you know, this will, as everyone's saying, it will take a little bit of work. It will take a little bit of elbow grease, right? You may have to sit on a YouTube video for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. As Vanessa had mentioned, you know, sitting down and actually jotting down all of the numbers and getting that takes a little bit of work, but the reward at the end of the day is something that's unimaginable. I think, you know, you would just consider being in a better position, not only for yourself financially, but also holistically and mentally. You unburden yourself sometimes, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Sometimes just writing it down on paper, like getting it out of your head and onto the paper, it contains the anxiety.
Yeah,
it's a lot smaller.
I'd also like to kind of add on a little bit of a nugget there as well, because say you go through that exercise, say you see this is income coming in, this is all my expenses, and then be observant of like, okay, what do I feel good about that? Do I feel shame? Do I feel guilt? Or what is coming up for you, whether you're doing that as a personal exercise or whether you're doing that as an arts administrator for your company? Because understanding and being observant of how you would relate to that, it all stems down to our relationship with our money, which is one topic that we had at the beginning of this conversation. There is something called money personalities out there, right? And if I could very simplify it, there are 4 different types in my mind. You're either a spender, you're a saver, you avoid money, or what I call you're a money monk, and you just don't. What that means is not even having any relationship to it because it's a black box in a way. And or it can be a combination of this. And so when you're going through this exercise, it can be really clear to see, because it's numbers, it's black and white numbers, if your money personality and the way you make decisions as an arts administrator, if you are a decision maker in your business, to see if some of that money personality attributes or characteristics are making those decisions in your organization. If it's based on you, or if it's actually a business decision, whether it's collective with the other fellow decision makers of the business. So being really mindful and being open to understanding what that is for yourself, I think it really gives clarity on better decision making later as well.
That's a great ad.
Sorry.
No, please go ahead. I just think that's a great ad. Yes.
One of the really important distinctions between individual investing and saving and doing it for an organization is the idea of shared responsibility, right? Accountability. So as an individual, you can take as much investment risk as you feel like you can tolerate. But if you're getting public funding, I totally advocate for investing public funding, but it's got to be a totally safe investment. You don't want to speculate with public funding. You don't want to put your public funding in any kind of vehicle where you might have any chance at all of losing the principal. So in other words, probably not the stock market, so probably not mutual funds, because there is a chance that you would put it in at this rate, and then when you actually are forced to cash it out because you're doing the project, if the value has decreased, then you've lost a portion of your grant, and the funder is still going to hold you accountable for spending the whole grant, which means you have to find the rest of the money that you lost on the stock market. Something that just bears interest, right? A guaranteed investment certificate, or GIC, or a term deposit where it's contracted, right? You sign a contract with the bank that says, here's how much money I'm putting in. I'm going to get this rate of interest over that amount of time. It's crystal clear, and you know that your money is safe.
Perfect. We're getting close to the end, so I do want to start to wrap up, but there are a couple of things that I just want to touch on before we do. I do want to do a recap with everyone before I give everyone an opportunity to provide feedback or still ask any questions that they may have that they're sitting on. But for you guys, what would you say is the main takeaway that you would want to leave people from this session today? Like, what do you want people to walk away from this session thinking? Let's start with Vanessa.
Sure. For me, the main takeaway is that money and investment doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be as risky or as a black box that you may think it is, or that mindset that we have. Educating ourselves, understanding a little bit more, getting the right people on your team, the right advisors on your team, whether that's a bookkeeper, whether that's your investment advisor, whether that's a tax accountant, or maybe that's an insurance person as well, to protect your money. Having those right individuals, your sounding board, to help guide you and position yourself for financial success in your business or personal. Just get those people on your team. Get those people on your team.
Thank you. Heather.
I would be saying, do something. Just do something. Just try, right? It's like starting an artistic practice, or starting an exercise program, or starting anything, right? You have to take a deep breath and say, I'm going to permit myself to fail. I'm going to permit myself to get it wrong. I'm going to permit myself to stumble. I'm going to pick myself up and try again. And as Vanessa said, find the right people to surround yourself with. You don't have to go it alone. There are some free resources out there. There's, folks that you can negotiate with in terms of price. So, just get out there and make a move. If you're feeling paralyzed because it's so unfamiliar and it feels like a very steep hill to climb, you just have to take that first step.
Thank you so much. Just as the moderator, I really value everything that you guys have said. What I would hope that everyone came out of the session that we just moderated is, I would say, it's going to take a little bit of work, but don't make yourself wrong, right? There was someone who mentioned in the chat that, we don't do a great job as Canadians on talking about money. And I think something that Kevin had mentioned earlier, again, was the collaboration that I really focused on, that key word. Let's talk about it, guys. Let's talk about, you don't have to talk about, the amount of money in your bank account, but talk about what you're thinking about if you're thinking about investing. Talk about what you just learned. Talk about, bring these up. We're getting better as Canadians with talking about money. But we have to be honest that the financial system does work with a little bit of ignorance. But if everybody understood how finances worked and how money works, Canadians in general would be so far better off than where we are right now. And we really need to demystify it. And the only way that we can do that is be open and say, let's have a conversation. What are you doing? Like, what did you do that worked recently? We mentioned GICs. Someone had mentioned to me GICs before. Like how did that work? Let me find out a little bit of information. So I think those are some of the key takeaways. It's going to take time. It's going to take a little bit of effort, and talk about it as much as you can, as often as you can. Learn about it. Talk about what you learned. All of that. Before we conclude the session, I did want to do a little bit of a recap, but we won't have that much time. So I think we'll post some links that we do have. We'll see if we can find a way to provide some links that we do have. But I did want to open up the floor to anyone who has any questions or has a discussion piece or something that was unclear that we can chat about right now. You know, one of the things that I've heard from both questions and comments was, you know, how do we get more cooperation from big business? Like, how do we get big business to sit down and work with us a little bit better, accommodate a little bit more to us? And I don't know if any of us on the call will have a great answer for that. It's almost a legacy thing. It's kind of a mindset thing as well too. And so I don't know. I'll open it up to the ladies because I found out that we do have another 8 minutes. So I apologize. I'll open it up to ladies to see if they have any ideas. I can give you my perspective of working in large firms. I work for Sun Life currently. I worked for Fidelity Investments and Desjardins before. But I want to give the ladies an opportunity to really respond if you've got anything.
Well, I think that it's easiest for a lot of those companies to do the thing that they've done in the past, right? Like, remember that the people that are making decisions about sponsorship or any other form of support are probably in the marketing / public affairs world, and they may have absolutely zero background or comprehension of even the slightest thing about you. So you walk through the door and the National Ballet of Canada knocks on the same door and they go, oh, the National Ballet, we can go on their website, we can read all about them. It's a big company. They advertise in the Globe and Mail. You know, it's sort of easy for them to say yes. And they know what the exchange is, right? They know what it's all about. So they are like Business for the Arts. I can't really speak for them, right? Like, I'm not affiliated. I just know that they're out there as a resource. But where they started was, we want to tell arts organizations how to ask us for money. And what they really meant was, we want to tell registered charities how to ask us for money, I think, because that's the framework within which it operates, right? Because if you give the money to a registered charity, it's, from a business point of view, it's a little bit different. If you just give the money straight up as a sponsorship, it's an allowable business expense. If you make a charitable donation, you can get a tax receipt, which is good for a tax reduction. So they're thinking from that point of view. In terms of their relationship with individual artists, a lot of them have active acquisitions programs. So a lot of major firms actually have a curator on staff. Depends on the company, of course. You know, one of the things that I'll just lob out there, one of the things that I like to do is try and get on the lists of major accounting and law firms. They will most of them will have an annual legal or accounting update for registered charities. And if you get to go to one of those things in their offices, they have amazing corporate art collections. So, you know, as an individual artist, that might be the path in, is to try to find out how to sell to them, because some of them will have a mandate to collect from contemporary Canadian artists. It's a thought.
Yeah. Vanessa, did you have any thoughts?
I think what Heather was saying has been, from the individual side, I think that's a good option, or a good opportunity to maybe to go down and see if that is viable for you. For those on the call that are looking at it from an organization standpoint, if you are an NPO, and I'm just going to expand on that, is when you start as a small organization, it's just you and maybe the visionaries of that organization. As you grow, as you broaden, then you may consider having a board of directors. And with that standpoint, I think what's really critical, and I've experienced this with a really big dance company here in Calgary, is ensuring that the vision of why that organization was started remains intact, despite maybe what some of the board of directors are there, because they're coming from it from a different mindset, say a for-profit or a corporate mandate. Knowing though that they are your advisors, that they each have their specialty areas to come into, the areas of what they're advising on, but sometimes a vision can get lost really, really easily, depending on who your board is. So when you get to a stage when you need that, to be really mindful is what I'm encouraging, to make sure that vision stays intact.
Yeah.
I want to jump in on that.
Sure.
Because this is, There's two places where I find that the corporate mindset or the business mindset might be in direct conflict with a nonprofit mindset. So number one is expenses, right? In the business world, expenses are those evil, terrible things that prevent you from making such a big profit, right? And in the not-for-profit world, expenses are what carry our mandate, right? So we're often raising money so that we can spend it. So this is a completely hostile worldview for somebody who's come out of a pure business background. They have trouble changing gears to that notion of expenses as being the good thing. The other thing is that from a business point of view, what businesses are all about is generating wealth for their owners. And in the not-for-profit sector, we're not really looking at accumulating wealth. I mean, it would be very sweet if we could, but often what we're really looking at is sustainability, right? So what we're looking for is enough, right? So you always want to make a bit of a profit. You always want to have a bit of a surplus so that there's gas in the tank for the next project, but you're not trying to sit on a giant pile of money. So when you do acquire a board of directors, if you have somebody walking through the door who feels about these things in a super different way from you, those are often the 2 points that you need to have in your back pocket as things that you need to educate them on.
Yeah. I think I'll come from it from a business aspect as well too, because I work with quite a few large organizations, and so I'll be honest with you guys. I think there's a piece of that, but I want to take something from both of you, and I think one, it really does require not collaboration. What's the word I'm looking for? Almost like a lobbying. It does require lobbying on behalf of arts. Because as Heather had mentioned, there really isn't an appreciation. And it's not for lack of trying. I think there are people in large organizations that really do care and really do want to try. And in some cases, they're trying to give money away, but they're not in the room with the people that are in the know, right? And so you have a lot of people who run D&I programs, HR programs, and stuff like that, who are of the best of intentions, but haven't necessarily been boots on the ground, know where to go. And so it's easy for folks to be like, well, there's a website and I can make the correlation. I can make the argument because this has a website, right? So I don't want to make it seem like business just doesn't care at all. There can absolutely be some of that, and we have to be honest and call that out when we see it. But there are quite a few times where we just don't know enough.